Alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, continuing reading of the book Ma'alim al-Tariq fi Talab al-Ilm. Last week we were in discussion about some of the examples of the Salaf, the pious predecessors, in their humility for one another and their absence of hasad, envy and jealousy. And we mentioned a number of examples, and the Shaykh continues, Shaykh Sadhan Hafidhullah Ta'ala, and he mentions in total of approximately 19 different examples of the scholars before us and some contemporary, good examples of humility. So we stopped at number 6. So continuing, he mentions the 7th example. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, one of the Imams visited Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, and while he was with him, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah passed by on his mule. And so Imam Ahmad got up to go after him, and when he caught up with him, he began asking about some issues and matters of fiqh. And the other man then returned, right? Ahmed came back to his companion. The man said to him, "Oh, Abu Abdullah, leave this. How long will this continue? When will you leave it?" Yani seeking knowledge from a Shafi'i. Means your status as an Imam, why you continue to revere Shafi'i. And what it seems to be intended is that he was trying to belittle or diminish the status of Imam Shafi'i. So Imam Ahmed said to him, because of his pious heart, if you want to understand fiqh, jurisprudence, then hold on to the tail of this mule. Means you should follow and study with Imam Shafi'i. And this shows you again, Imam Ahmed, despite his status, even as an Imam in Hadith and fiqh, he continued to benefit from Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah until Shafi'i moved to Egypt. And so this shows you again the humility. These two great Imams who have two of the 4 madhabs that are pronounced and well known in the world. And the 8th example of Farra, rahimahullah, the well-known grammarian, is narrated from Salama that he said, I'm not surprised at how Al-Farra, he extols and praises Al-Kisa'i, who is a greater and older than him in knowledge and age. And the Farra is older in terms of his age and knowledge and grammar, but he's still praising this great Imam, who is also a grammarian, showing then that the person who's older and more knowledgeable usually is the one who's going to receive that respect. But yet we see here the Salaf that they would not be shy to say that, those who are more knowledgeable than them or have more benefit them, to give them their due. Whereas in today's time, it is difficult for people, because that would mean that if you praise someone else, then your status is not very, very high. Well, this is what people think, so they try to refrain from it. But the Salaf, they saw it as opposite, as we said before. Whoever is humble for Allah's sake, Allah raises them. So they saw it as this: if you humble yourself for Allah's sake, Allah gives you more. Whereas if the opposite is true, as we'll see towards the end. And he mentioned the 9th example, Shaykh Sulayman Taymiyyah rahimahullah, that he says that we all know about, he had debates and arguments with scholars of his times, and these debates went on for a long time. And the point is, one of these scholars, when they died, the news reached Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah, and a man came to Shaykh al-Islam giving the glad tidings, the good news, thinking that Shaykh al-Islam would rejoice as a weak-willed person would, and be pleased with the death of the opponent and enemy. But Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah said, with the perspective of a pious and devout scholar, rebuked him, saying, "Do you bring me the good news of the death of a Muslim? And this is not pleasing to Allah nor to anyone who has love for Islam and Muslims." And Shaykh al-Islam went to the man's house, greeted his family and children, and said, "I am but a father to you," meaning that which is between me and your father does not disturb the purity of our harmony or affection. And he prayed for him. And this example, I believe our teacher Al-Fajr, they went through this in the lecture about Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, and statements are taken out of context. So this story happened, it's narrated by his students. But the intent behind it, Shaykh Islam rahimahullah, in this case showing the kindness to the people of that person who was supposed to be his enemy. But at the same time, this didn't mean Shaykh al-Islam was watered down or didn't have the principles of Ahl Sunnah when it comes to Ahl Bid'ah, or the things that we're learning in Brother Majid's class. The answer is no. So inshallah, for more details, I would encourage you to read. Listen to Al-Fajr's lecture where he explains this incident and the details of it. But the point this Shaykh's trying to highlight, Shaykh Sadhan, is that Shaykh al-Islam to me, he left that aside for what he thought to be greater good, and it's obviously showing the purity of his heart. This is the key, the purity of his heart. Right? So we should pay attention to how some people misunderstand it and read it some other way. The 10th example he mentions, Muhammad ibn Salama, or Muhammad ibn Salam and Abu Hafs al-Faqih, two great Imams. Imam Zahabi says about them, they were they had an affection, brotherhood, and harmony between them despite differences in their madhabs, يعني in fiqh. And the Shaykh says this should be the example for all the peers to honor one another. And so this is important, right? If there's differences of opinion in something of the furu' subsidiary issues, it shouldn't lead to the differences between our people's hearts. And that's why we say it's blameworthy to have al-iftiraq, division, which creates hatred. Whereas ikhtilaf, it's a difference in uqul, in qulub. I understand something differently, you understand something differently in the masail, in the issues where there's difference allowed. Whereas when we have ikhtilaf, this is one, iftiraq, the divisions when groups are made. This is why the Sharia prohibits it, because the differences that we're having, first of all, in the wrong areas. Usually we said usul, foundational matters, and then they lead to groups and ahzab, parties. And so how the Salaf had this brotherhood, despite differing in subsidiary issues, is how Ahl Sunnah and the students of knowledge should be. Someone differs between something where difference of opinions allowed, you shouldn't be extreme and should remove that brotherhood from one another. Rather, you have to have a spacious heart. And this is very important nowadays, because today people have become very, unaccommodating when it comes to these sort of differences. Even in Masail was ikhtilaf is qadim, yani it's all difference of opinion. Yet imagining today people are getting angry around there. Something Salaf differed over, and then you and your brother are fighting over, and you want to kick him out of the Sunnah, or even worse, boycott him. For that, it's not correct. Rather, someone should have a better opinion. But if it comes to the issues that we're talking about, Aqeedah Manhaj, then that's where the red line is. That's when we look carefully, investigate, and you have to be strict in those matters. The 11th example, Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah was asked about a matter, and Imam Ibn Wahab was present, who was the Imam of the Egyptians at that time, of Egypt. So the question asked Ibn Uyayna, but Ibn Uyayna realized another scholar was present, so he directed his question to him, Ibn Wahab. And he said, this is the leading scholar of Egypt, and he reports on authority of Malik, such and such narrations. So it's important to understand that Sufyan ibn Uyayna is from the scholars of Mecca, Ibn Wahab, scholars of Egypt. He studied with Malik, and so did Sufyan and others. They're all like in the same age, contemporary stage. But see how that difference, right? The people more knowledgeable and more humble. That's how the student knowledge should be amongst his peers. So he says he didn't keep the answer to himself, but rather he gave it to Allah scholar, recognizing his right, honoring his status and merit, and diminishing spirit of brotherhood. Therefore, the student knowledge should follow this approach. He should not be selfish, nor prioritize self-love and ego, nor elevate himself above his brothers, nor become resentful, angry, or distressed if he learns that one of his peers has surpassed him. If he were to abandon all of this, many avenues of good will open up for him. And this is the truth, right? If somebody really is humble, Allah will increase him. But more importantly, if somebody has a good heart, why would it bother you if another person who had a sunnah did the work for you? Right? We were mentioning before in the discussion on Sunday that if a person is like a doctor, if he gets cured at someone else's hand, a professional, one is going to be wondering, asking questions. Why, for example, two doctors, one refers the other to a specialist, another one cures him or gets him the treatment by Allah's permission, the other one's not jealous. But here we have, when it comes to ilm, the heart, someone else answers a question, why you ask him, didn't ask me? The question should be, did he get it right? Alhamdulillah. That's it. That's all we want. We want people to be guided. But today it's this part. Why are you going to him? You should come to me. I know better. He's wrong. He's made a mistake. Or sometimes trying to outdo somebody for no reason. And this is why it's very important to pay attention to this point. The setup that were like this. And even ulama till today. And it's gone from the quality of the people of knowledge. So student knowledge should learn that quickly. That there's no benefit. Rather, just look at the outcome. We need more khair. We need not less. And then he mentioned another example. Example 12. Akhfash is a well-known grammarian, was a close student of Sibawayh for a long period. And although Akhfash was older than him, this did not prevent him from being humble and striving to acquire knowledge, even those who were younger than him, from those younger than him. And he wasn't affected by people's criticism and disparagement. And this is well known in the books of Salaf that they took hadith and benefit from those younger in age than them. Another example, which is very interesting, because there's a lot of benefits in it, but the ulama usually mention the mihna of Waki' bin Jarrah, rahimahullah. And Waki' bin Jarrah is well-known hadith scholar, even Imams of Salaf, right? Students of Sufyan bin Thawri, rahimahullah, and others. So what happened to him, the ulama, like Imam al-Dhahabi and Sirah A'lam al-Nubala and others, they mentioned the story, the summary of which, that once he came from Iraq to Mecca. So of course his status is well-known, hadith scholar from Iraq, everyone wants to hear hadith from him. So then he sat down to narrate the hadith, and the people of Mecca are there, and the nobles from Banu Hashim, and also the Emir of Mecca and the like. So what happened was he narrated them a hadith, and the hadith narrated them. It wasn't the proper context to narrate it there. So what he said to him, narrate the hadith, so he narrated the hadith about Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death. Abu Bakr Siddiq, when the Prophet ﷺ died, he kissed him on the forehead and he said to him that Rasulullah, you didn't, my mother and father be sacrificed for you. You didn't, your life was always blessed, both living and dead. It means your body has always been blessed, both living and dead. And then he says it was also narrated by one of the early scholars that after 1 or 2 days he sat like this, alayhi salatu salam, right, means he passed away, and nothing changed except for his belly and his finger. Means his belly became a little more protruding and his finger a little bent. Other than that, the body was as is. So this last part, when he narrated, Banu Hashim, they got angry and said, Astaghfirullah Azim, he's belittling Rasulullah, and that's our lineage. So they took his affair to the court to the point they want to crucify him and execute him for it. And before continuing, it's a fa'idah for the people who are listening. And Zahabi, when he mentions this, Mihna, volume 9, page 160, he says, the Mihna Waki' wa hiya ghariba. It's absolutely amazing and wondrous. And then he says that وَلَمْ يُرِدْ إِلَّا خَيْرًا. He only intended good Waki'. وَلَكِنْ فَاتَتْهُ سَكْتَةٌ وَقَدْ قَالَ النَّبِيُّ صلى الله عليه وسلم كَفَى الْمَرْءِ إِثْمًا أَنْ يُحَدِّثَ بِكُلِّ مَا سَمِعَ. But he made the mistake here because the Rasul said it's sufficient of a sinful person to narrate everything that he hears. So he narrated a hadith that he heard in the wrong context, they put him in a fitna. So a student of knowledge should not do that. Should know who he's talking to. This is the 4 principles of da'wah. The da'iyah and the mad'u. The mawdu' and the wasila. So da'iyah is you, the mad'u who you're calling, the mawdu' the subject, and the wasila using. If you don't know your audience and you tell them subject, become fitna. In this case, it can't get bigger than this. You almost lose your life. Right? So some hadith is not good. You don't tell the awam. And this is what the Jews are highlighting today. People debating, they're bringing out things that nobody knew about. Today the kuffar are happy. They say, oh, we never knew about that. These shubuhat, the kuffar, they have cheap product. They have nothing. But today what's happening, we're opening everything for them. Out of where? Where is it going? With the arrogance. So here we can see it was a genuine mistake. But then later, what was the finish in the story? They got so heated that when they were trying to make the rumor they were to crucify him because he's fallen to some form of tashayyu'. Right? Otherwise, why would he narrate the hadith like this? They thought he had some Shi'ism with him. Sufyan ibn Uyayna got involved. And of course, Sufyan, at that time, they said he had a problem between him and Waki'. But nonetheless, he got involved and he went to them in order to solve it. And this is the Sheikh's point that he's trying to highlight. He went to them and he told them, this is the Imam from Iraq. It's not possible for you guys to do that. And he pardoned him. And then the story, they pardoned him and he left. So the point the Shaykh is trying to highlight is that this is great Imam. The interference of Sufyan to help him shows again, the Shaykh says, that may Allah mercy upon him did not exploit that situation, even though he was capable of doing so. Rather, his piety, by the grace of Allah, promoted him to remind the Emir of Mecca of Waqi''s virtue and the greatness of his position amongst the people. And that killing him was something that was not tolerated, right? And it was going to create a bigger fitna, right? Because then it's going to create fitna between Mecca and people in Iraq. And so here we can see a great benefit, right? We can learn from this, and we saw it before with the Sahaba, when there's a problem between the people, it should not lead to the worse. And a person who has humility, he will do for his brother what loves to be done for him. Right? But the people who intend bad, this is their opportunity. Right? Someone you don't have a problem with is in trouble, we're going to be rejoicing. Astaghfirullah. Right? So if someone wants more, read that story or qissa. And many ulama narrated, right? And just talk about it in terms of the benefits that are there. The 14th example, he says, Talha rahimahullah, the reciters gathered at his house, and they said, the house of Al-Hakim al-Utayba, and they said unanimously that Talha was the most knowledgeable person among them, and he had the best and most learned recitation. So when he reached Talha, and he humbled himself and went to Al-A'mash, and he narrated, or read the Quran to him, right, recited upon him, in order to humble himself. And the Shaykh says he did this, right, recited to him, so the effect of that description would be removed from his heart. So when the people praised them, he felt it. So he wanted to get rid of it, so he humbled himself and go and recite to a teacher. Because the student and teacher has a upper hand on you, so he wanted to humble himself. So the Shaykh said this is a very difficult matter, because most people love to be praised and commended. However, know that praise, if accompanied by conceit, is a calamity for its owner. And so beware of being careless with it. And that's a very important point. That if somebody is praised, even though it leads to i'jab, vanity, there's no benefit in that praise. It's better to be criticized. Because being criticized for something that's true about you, at best it doesn't improve you. And if it's a batil, it's falsehood, inshallah you get reward for being patient. Someone said nonsense about you. But when someone praises you and you create i'jab, you fall into a major sin of vanity, unless you clean your heart. And many people today, this is their problem. They're praised by people who they know and we know they're lying. Right? So you know and they know, both of you are lying. But right, flattery, right, it's a fitna for people. So this is a great benefit of how the Salaf would deal with this issue of i'jab and top of hasad. He says the 15th example, Ismail ibn Ulayya was Ismail ibn Ibrahim ibn Muqsim al-Asadi. He says that this Imam was one of the teachers of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. And once the prayer was about to begin one day, and him, Ismail and Imam Ahmad were in the Jama'ah, and he was, Imam Ahmad, one of the students of Ismail. So he said to the students, tell him, Imam Ahmad, go ahead and lead the prayer, to go forward. So he knew that he was better and more deserving of presence than him. This is a matter, again, it's not easy, Shaykh said, but difficult to apply. It's easy to read, difficult to apply, except for those whom Allah has given mercy. So imagine the student, the teacher, and the students telling the teacher to the student to the teacher telling the student to go lead the salah. Right? So this is also again showing the virtue, because leading salah, what does it mean? It doesn't mean it's your turn to lead salah. If you're gonna put him ahead, it means he's gonna have better qira'ah or more knowledge of sunnah, etc., etc. Right? More virtue. That's the extent, or more fiqh, right? From that angle. So this is also humility of the great imams that they would have for the students, and a great encouragement for them when this do. Another one, example 16, Salama consulted Ishaq about his son Ahmed bin Salama's journey to Abu Raja, Qutayb bin Sa'id, one of the students and narrators, one of the narrators of the Sahih. And when he consulted him, Ishaq was contemporary of Qutayb. Ishaq said, your son has studied with me, narrated from me, and I think you might permit him to travel to Qutayb to study with him. For Qutayb possesses knowledge that we do not, and he is capable of advising him against going. However, a person of knowledge who views things with piety and scrupulous would do what he did. So he was advising him to go study with him. Again, showing humility, preference for his brother out of humility. Example number 17, he says, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah mentioned Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, and he said, praising him, no one like Ishaq has ever crossed the bridge of Khurasan to us, even though he just differs with us in some matters, for people have always differed from one another. And he's talking about fiqh, right? Ishaq is one of the great imams of fiqh. And so is Imam Ahmad. So all the books of contemporary fiqh or comparative fiqh, you find his name there. Waqal Ishaq, Waqal Ahmad, usually sometimes together. But with this, he said he differs with us, yet, right? Imam Ahmad said people, they always cease to differ, they will never cease to stop differing. Again, furu', we're talking subsidiary issues. He says, thus, there was a difference of opinion between them on some issues, yet Imam Ahmad mentioned his virtues and noble qualities. And that shows you they had no ta'assub, no blind bigotry and partisanship when it comes to issues and madhabs and stuff like this. Because in the day, you may say Ahmad rahimahullah represents his views and Ishaq another. Then you have Imam Bukhari who studied both and he has his own. This is how it's supposed to be. Not today, everybody's just going to hold on to one view and say this is the right way, even though they know the different opinions. So this is again humility of Salaf, but also how they understood difference of opinion the right way. Example 18. The 18th example was said to Sufyan, Malik disagrees on this hadith with you. And Sufyan al-Thawri. And both the men of hadith, so Sufyan said, rahimahullah, Malik and I are like as Jarir, the poet said, and the young camel, if he's not weakened in a horn, if he's not weakened in the horn, or if he's not weakened, because he's weakened in the horn, cannot withstand the attack of the strong, mature camels. Meaning, who am I, such that I should differ with Imam Malik, rahimahullah. Malik is a great Imam, and I am small in comparison to him. This is what he's trying to say. Even though they're allowed to differ in this matter. This is the point. Even though it's a difference of hadith, and this is difference, it goes back to ijtihad and sometimes tasheeh and tad'if. But still, out of respect for his teacher and those who are older than him. And this doesn't mean then they didn't differ, right? That's another thing. That's another different point we have benefit. They still differed. But this means they will not make that, right, something that becomes apparent, showing respect. And that's what's missing today, that you can differ but with respect. But some people, they have the other views, so you can't even differ. So no, that's not correct. You have to differ. If it's something allowed to differ over, you can. But how do you represent the other view with respect? Even the different madhabs, when you cite them and you narrate them with respect. The 19th example, he says, and this is from our contemporary scholars, the Sheikh says, and this is mentioned, even though the Sheikh wasn't present, and this is between Sheikh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, and Sheikh Hamoud al-Tuwaijiri, rahimahullah. On several issues they differed. So these two Imams, Sheikhs of our time, were well known. So Sheikh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, coming from Syria and Jordan, when he came to Saudi Arabia for the duration when he was teaching in the Islamic University of Medina, him and Sheikh Hamoud al-Tuwaijiri and others, they differed on some issues of fiqh, like Taraweeh, prayer, and others. And you can see the back and forth that they had on these matters. So each responded to one another in book form, right? And responded to one another in detail. But he says in 1410, Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah came to Riyadh to visit. So that's going to be 1989 or 1980. It's supposed to be 1989, 90, I think, on there, yeah. So he says Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah, Sheikh Tuwaijiri met him, and they had a gathering for dinner at one of the shuyukh's house. And Sheikh Hamoud extended the invitation to Sheikh Al-Albani as well, and he accepted. So Sheikh Al-Albani, Sheikh Hamoud, in a house with gathering, which was remarkable in respect, and preferred one another in terms of the gathering. And disagreements were resolved, and only affection, brotherhood, love remained. And he said, if I were to mention to someone that Sheikh Al-Albani visited Sheikh Hamoud Tuwaijiri, he would find it hard to believe because of the level of different disagreement between them. And one of the Sheikh's, Hamoud's son, who was present at that time, said, or told me, the Sheikh Stahan saying, he told me that among the things that impressed them the most at that gathering was the respect shown to him by the Sheikh, his preference for the food, offering it to him, bringing him to the door, bringing him near like this. And I mentioned the examples, the Sheikh says, so that we may understand that even the scholars may differ in their viewpoints, in the deriving rulings and evidence. And when they come together, yet they set aside the differences in brotherhood and interactions are seen. And he says disagreements and issues and differing viewpoints do not lead or exclude mutual respect. And each may disagree with the other, but differing opinions do not necessitate loss of affection, nor do they necessarily lead to hatred. And we are brothers who love one another, and none of us would tolerate being slandered or criticized in their presence. However, you may have one viewpoint in a matter, and another has another. And this difference of opinion doesn't prevent the continuation of this. And we know the scholars, both past and present, have always differed. And this is an ongoing phenomenon amongst the scholars. And because people differ in their intellects and understanding. That's the point. People differ in their intellects and understanding. And one person may possess greater intelligence than another. And one may perceive something hidden that's hidden to another. As Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that perhaps the one who is conveying, right, is one who has been conveyed to the hadith is more understanding of it than the one who heard it the first time. And this shows you again that this is the reality we may notice, because it may be that someone narrated the hadith and someone else understood it differently. So sometimes the latter scholars, they may have different interpretation based on what can be interpreted from the hadith, and usually again following other groups. And then they were not the ones who narrated the hadith initially. They just simply got the hadith. And also shows, the Shaykh said, that therefore we must be wary and cautious of what may enter our hearts. So if you see your brother of yours who has surpassed you, and whom Allah has given that which He has not given you, beware lest any ill intent enter your heart. And if any such ill will does not enter your heart, then it has entered your heart, and seek forgiveness of Allah. And repent to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ask Him to make your brother, right, beloved to you. And remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word, idfa' billati hiya ahsanu fa idha alladhi baynaka wa baynahu adawatun ka'annahu waliyyun hamim. And repel that evil with that which is better, for therefore perhaps between you and the one with enmity will become then a close friend. This ayah, as he mentioned before, and this is the cure for the issue. Right, if somebody and somebody else have a problem, idfa' billati ahsan. Eventually you're going to create the brotherhood, because the end result is there. كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. And this is not just for the students, it's for people in life. You have a problem with somebody in work, you have a problem with somebody, your neighbor, this is how you're going to solve it. And then the Shaykh says that, so what then, if this is between the brothers and students of knowledge, means this is what Allah says about enemies. What about them between two people who are supposed to be brothers, are brothers and student of knowledge at the same time? So they're more deserving, more not needed for them to deflect that which is in their hearts. And that leads to the last point I want to mention in relation to this topic, because the Shaykh finishes the chapter, and he talks about the next chapter, طالب علم ونفسه. مع نفسه, the student knowledge in himself. That the issue of pride and arrogance, because the Shaykh was talking about hasad, at the end he's talking about humility. So from humility we said, Allah raises a person. And with knowledge, Allah raises a person. But what happens when someone is arrogant? This is a question that people have to ask. What happens with arrogance? So ultimately, a person who's arrogant, and student knowledge can be this way. And arrogance is to reject the truth. I come to Nas looking down on people, I'm holding them in contempt. It leads to humiliation. So to take a look at the parallel, when somebody is humble, they go off with dunya wal akhirah. يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. You go up. Humility brings you up. Arrogance brings you down. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions in Majmu' Fatawa, when he talks about the Yahud and Nasara and what happened to them, he says each of these ummas, Allah punished them with the crime that they due to the crime they committed, بِنِقِيدِ قَصْدِهِ, with the opposite of what they intended. Means the Yahud, because they fell into the kibr at that time, arrogant, Allah gave them what? Humiliation. And Nasara, they did shirk with ta'deed, they fall into association, polytheism, so Allah gave them misguidance. So he says, Shaykh Islam, that anyone who falls into a certain crime and sin, Allah will punish him with the opposite. Talib ilm tries to raise himself, Allah is going to bring him to the floor. That's what happens. And the people, they have also have no mercy either. Means the person who's arrogant, the people are going to show him first. Means Allah will punish them through that. The people who praise you are going to say bad things about you. And we see it today. All those people on YouTube, they were up, they went to the sky, they came to the floor. But what's interesting about it is that that's the understanding, the setup, they understood that well. But today, people didn't understand that. And so it's almost like if you want to become a good standing inside of Allah first, you have to be humble, then with the people. Be humble to the people. What happens? Allah will raise you. You don't have to worry anything yourself. Don't worry about yourself. Allah will raise you. But today, it's that problem. Therefore, Ibn Abdul Barr, rahimahullah, he writes in Jami' Bayan al-Ilmi wa Fadli, narration 969, مقالوا, and it was said by the ulama before, من أعجب برأيه ذل, whomsoever is amazed by his opinion, ذل, he'll be humiliated. ومن استغنى بعقله ذل, and whomsoever is self-sufficient or feels content with his aql, he's going to become misguided. ومن تكبر على الناس ذل, and whoever is arrogant over the people is humiliated. ومن خالط الأندال حقر, and whoever mixes with the lowly will become humiliated. ومن جالس العلماء بقرة, and whoever sits with the ulama will become honored. Beautiful words. يعني قالوا, يعني was said before, من أعجب برأيه ذل, whoever is amazed by his own opinion will be humiliated. And so if you hold an opinion, you argue with your brother, how do you know you're right? You ask Allah, Allah guide me to that which is most correct. Some people, they believe their opinion is wahi. That's your opinion on the mas'ala. If it's ikhtilaf, how do you know you're right? If it wasn't, it was ijma', we were all together. But difference opinion, have mercy. Understand, don't mix the two. But you're allowed to defend your opinion, that's not wrong. Defend your view and believe it to be right. But then what happens? You have arrogance. وَمَنِ اسْتَغْنَى بِعَقْلِهِ, whoever puts his mind, be self-sufficient, بدون wahyain, zal, he's become misguided. And that's the way the mutakallimin, all of them, the philosophers, they use their minds, they fell off the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Become misguided, right? Because they're using their minds on intellect solely. And this is our shahid. وَمَنْ تَكَبَّرَ عَلَى النَّاسِ ذَلْ, whomsoever humiliates the people, arrogant over the people will be humiliated. And then وَمَنْ خَالَتَ الْأَنْذَالِ حُقِّرَ, whoever sits or mixes with the people who are lowly in status, then that person will be diminished and humiliated. وَمَنْ جَالِسَ الْعُلَمَاءُ مُقِّرَ, whoever sits with the ulama, he will be honored. And that's the benefit of sitting with them, to learn from them and to benefit and to raise your status. So here we can see the importance of being cautious of arrogance. So humility gives you elevation. Humility gives you a reward. Arrogance creates the opposite of what you're intending. But the problem obviously is when someone knows more, then this is when they become arrogant, because they feel then they deserve more or they are better. But in reality, the more you know, the more liable you are in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you know more. And the higher the expectation on you and others. The higher the expectation on you from others. But today, this is a point that people have to pay attention to, because it's a great benefit. And then Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, he also adds to this, when he mentioned that whoever is punished, right, the people punished with the opposite of what they received, he said, Yawm al-Qiyamah, it comes in the hadith that Allah will resurrect the Jabbarun, the arrogant, متكبرون, right? So those tyrannical, arrogant people, Yawm al-Qiyamah, in the form of ants, in which the people will step on them with their feet. And that's his proof for this as well. Right? So Yawm al-Qiyamah, the people who are arrogant, they're going to come, right, in the form of humans in the size of ants. So the people will step on them in order to humiliate them. Hadith is Sahih and Tirmidhi, and also Shaykh Al-Albani authenticates as well. And this is a point that we need to be careful of, that we don't want to be considering ourselves bigger than we are, but also the dangers of the student knowledge is trying to be lifted, his status by Allah's permission, through the ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with. And also that requires him to avoid envy and to avoid jealousy, and also to be humble. And part of humility also, the Shaykh didn't mention here, is that someone accepts their mistakes. You make a mistake, you apologize, you rectify. You go on the public, if you say a public mistake, you correct it, make a bayan. Right? Some people, they don't want to do that. Say, it's okay, we'll just delete it. Delete it. If everyone heard what you said, it's not going to be enough. Unless, especially if it's a big issue. So if it's something, maybe you missed a word. But imagine someone get a whole wrong opinion. Then it says, okay, don't worry, we're just going to delete it. No one will see it. The problem is what? Why is it? What's preventing us? Is that a kibr that's in the heart? I can't be wrong. It's mentioned Kitab Jarh wa Ta'dil, Ibn Hatim Razi. He mentions in there that Al-Awza'i rahimahullah, he was the quickest person to retract his mistakes. I've never seen someone quicker in retracting mistakes than Imam Al-Awza'i. Manhaj Salaf, make a mistake quick to print. First, if they correct it immediately. Whereas some people will say, well, I don't know if you're right, then look for another view. Or maybe they'll just say, you're envious. Why are you correcting me? Why? Do you have nothing else to do? And this is important because these are the signs you see today. In social media today, you may see everything in front of us. So what the Shaykh is saying in this chapter, it's not something in the books, it's something in the present. And that also shows, I want to finish with this point, the importance of the tarbiyah. And the manhaj salaf, the person who has a proper methodology, inshallah ta'ala, they get the proper outcomes because they follow the right path in learning. They know the signposts of danger as well will lead you to the guidance. But today, if you will skip all that, or you assume knowledge is simply information, not character or manners or things to work in your heart, just simply things you know, then subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have this problem today and we find that it can affect more and more people. So a person take heed of these, inshallah ta'ala will protect them in the beginning of the talab. Next week we continue. Shaykh has a chapter on the talab ilm and himself. Talab ilm and himself, how he deals with himself in terms of fixing his heart, fixing his ibadah, fixing his issues, and he carries on from here. And some may ask, where is the Shaykh spending so much time on these topics? Where is the details of how to memorize this? And because this isn't the muqaddimat, it's a muqaddimah. Can't be talking about talab if you're already here. Right? So someone, for example, with diseased heart and is trying to fill it with ilm, it's not going to work. The same with somebody is not even rectified between him and Allah. Imagine, how is he going to be benefiting from the knowledge? So that's why these topics, we should not skip over them. Pay heed to them. This is what made the Imams and Salaf the Imams. Inshallah, any questions or points? Inshallah. Yes, brother. So some they say this narration it could be from the one Rawi he narrated, so it may not be incorrect. And so some they say he shouldn't have mentioned it. And others they say that based on other wording that mentioned that his body was as it was. So but you're right, if you say if it's authentic, then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is still a human. But some they say that riwayat at that point was disputable to be narrated and in the context as well. So there's two issues. Maybe it wasn't something he should have mentioned at all because of it can be disputed. But that was the point also that made that we were trying to highlight. Allahu a'lam. Yes, brother. Allahu a'lam. Yeah, these stories on Shafi'i met Abu Hanifa and this. I don't know about this. But we know other stories. Abdullah Mubarak met Abu Hanifa and they had dispute of Al-Din, and it wasn't as cordial. It was more the academic. So do we say at the end of the day, Wallahu a'lam. But the point is that's another question that comes, mas'ala fiqhiyya. If a person is behind the imam and he has a different view to him, do you have to follow him? The ulama, they say you don't have to. If he says, for example, he agrees that something sunnah, you don't agree, mutaba'ah, that's not part of mutaba'ah. You don't have to. That's outside topic. Mutaba'ah, they say, is fil af'al, the actions mainly, from the wajibat, the salah, and the arkan. And then the aqwal, they have a different opinion on that, which ones, like the Fatiha and other ones. But when it comes to the sunnah, you hold something to be sunnah, let's say raf' al-yadayn, or ta'meen, and he doesn't. You're not going to say no ameen today because he's Hanafi. No, that's not the mutaba'a you're talking about. And so you go back to the books, but some ulama who did take that view, mutaba'a is in everything, you follow the imam in everything, then they come from that angle. Or from the angle that, if let's say you're the only one doing it, you don't want to cause a fitna, right? Because let's say people don't know about this, right? So that's why some sunnahs, you will not do it someplace out of fear of that, if that's something that's real. So if it's authentic, wallahu alam, we have to first check it, wallahu alam. Anyone have any questions? طيب إن شاء الله سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.